So in the last couple days, there was a bit of a stir up on the Rippaverse Reddit, and I want to kind of talk about the post, but just summarize it really. So in the description down below, you'll find that post. You'll also find a link to a YouTube video that has a video of this guy who wrote this analysis, speaking and being interviewed. But basically what this analysis is a breakdown of the numbers so far of this new Alpha Core book that was just released through Eric July's Rippaverse label by some other writers that he brought onto his team, as well as Rippaverse 2, the second edition of the first book that was put out by Eric July that holds the ISOM name. That is the book that's tied up in this whole lawsuit drama. So I want to just talk about briefly sort of what this goes over and sort of my general take of it. Basically what this guy has done is broken down the numbers that we've had so far from this first Alpha Core campaign in comparison to the numbers from ISOM 2 and in comparison to the numbers of ISOM 1, but really focusing on ISOM 2. And what he's found is that the numbers in the first few days are not the same. In fact, the numbers are quite much lower. And so I want to talk a bit about that. And kind of go over why I think that happened, and I ultimately think the guy's analysis is fairly decent. Me coming from like an auditing background and stuff, a lot of the stuff he talks about in here is some of the stuff I've had to do too, so it makes sense from a business perspective as well. I will say this, ultimately he talks about the issue of Eric July with the first issue of ISOM getting a huge push by the media. Fox and Blaze and people like this obviously mentioning the book and talking about it over and over. We didn't see this as much with ISOM 2, and we've seen this virtually none with Alpha Core. And so what he puts forward is that is one of the primary reasons for this drop-off, and I actually agree with him there. He also talks about the fan base sort of fracturing and indie comics as a whole sort of having problems, and I think that's apparent, right? We've seen this breakup of the comics gators and the other areas of the indie comics attached to sort of the Nerdrotics crew and the Heel versus Babyface Eric July crew, even though only one of those people, from my understanding, has actually created comics, that's Eric July, and his comics are in question as far as opinions if you go online. And a lot of that is because he basically, reacted poorly, in my opinion, to the trolling that came his way. And so, unfortunately, that's sort of the spiral that has existed. And this Reddit post does a great job of sort of pointing that out, that this is a spiral, not only from a cultural point of view, from the internet point of view, but from a financial point of view, right? Ultimately, what Eric July has done is he spent more money to make books that are making less money, right? Now, you might say, well, we're used to that in the comic book world because the first issues are going to make more money, people are interested in it, less people are going to read that second book. But what you have to also keep in mind is we're talking about the YouTube ecosystem, and so some of that should be softened, right, by the fact that you have a large fan base built in that most comic creators don't have. And again, this is another thing brought up in this Reddit post, is that there's a big deal made by Rippaverse fans of the people that are being brought in to this Rippaverse community by Eric, the people that he's paying to help create comics, including this whole Alpha Core book that's being campaigned right now. And that is that these people don't really have a built-in fan base. Now people will say, well, of course they do. There are tons of fans that love these guys. The majority of the normie audience that's going to come across Eric July's books are going to be coming across it from YouTube and from YouTube videos. They're not going to be coming across it from normie environments. They were coming across it in normie environments when it was being aired on things like Fox News and The Blaze. But as that's not happening as much, those sales are going to drop. And because you've hired these people to create the books that ultimately cost much more money to employ, as that money, the financials of the business drops, you're also taking on more of a burden because you're adding to the employment. Now, Eric's obviously subsidized this. I've seen on Twitter X that this has been done by hiring basically colorists and people like that who are maybe a little bit cheaper, which makes sense from a financial point of view. I don't have a problem with that if the quality is good, but as I made clear on one of the streams I was on, and I think many other people have made clear, that isn't exactly the case, because a lot of people have a problem with some of the artwork and ISOM being muddled and flat. And that's something that I pointed out in my sort of glancing review on stream. I just didn't really find the artwork to be very appealing. In fact, I found it very drab and boring, which is the opposite you want from a comic book. Even black and white pinned comic books can get sort of emotion across, which I think that ISOM personally had a really hard time doing, and I think that was true on both books, by the way, 1 and 2. Now, I'm not sure about Alpha Core, haven't looked at that book at all, whatever. Haven't really looked at ISOM 2 other than just what I've seen. I haven't read that book cover to cover, but I did read ISOM 2. So it's just an interesting thing to see the reaction to this Reddit post. I wouldn't say the reaction was directly bad on Reddit, but over on social media, of course, with X, it certainly was. We had you know, the sort of Rippaverse fans and Rippaverse skeptics going at it, which was kind of fun, of course, and people making jokes. But after the heel versus babyface clip, which I'll play right here,
I believe in what he's trying to do, and that's why it's got my support. Just like I did believe in EVS, but then he stuck knives in our backs because he's just a jealous, fucking weird, egotistical, self-destructive fool. And then my belief in him went, gone forever, done. I believe in Graham Nolan. I believe that what Graham Nolan is doing is just creating great, fun content.
I don't think that people in the Comicsgate community appreciate that clip very much for obvious reasons. Heel versus babyface, completely off base, and I think ultimately many people on the internet see this for what it is, which is him being angry at EVS, but ultimately seeing it as easy to take on EVS because he's got the backing of Eric's fans and he has the backing of all these nerdrotic fans that are going to sort of build up behind him. Personally, I think EVS is a big spotlight in the comic community and helps a lot of indie comic creators. So it's frustrating to me to see sort of the war going on right now. But ultimately, I think one of the groups are sending messages to people in private, sort of telling them what to do or not do, and the other isn't. And so that becomes a bit of a problem. So, but that's the update. Go read this Reddit post and go look at the reactions online. Go watch the interview with the guy. It's very interesting. This was not written by somebody who doesn't support Eric. On the contrary, it was written by somebody who was a supporter of Eric and I believe still is a supporter of Eric from reading it. So, very interesting stuff. Stay tuned for more stuff. We got a stream coming up really soon, the next day here. We're going to cover some of this stuff as well as just some news topics and going back to sort of the normal stuff that we talk about here on this channel as I decide whether I need to create a separate channel just to make pop culture videos, because this shit is piling up on my upload list. Peace.